He promised to love her forever. Guests were seated. The wedding hall was glowing. She was walking down the aisle. And then, the billionaire vanished. What could make a man who built an empire from nothing walk away from the woman he loved on the most important day of his life? Stay with me, because the truth will change the way you see success forever. I was not born powerful. I was born in a one-room house, where rain leaked through the ceiling, and ambition felt like arrogance. My father carried bricks. My mother carried hope. I carried shame. At 17, I watched my father collapse at a construction site. The dust settled on his skin, like the world had already buried him. That day I made a promise to poverty. I would defeat it, or it would destroy me. I worked through nights that smelled of sweat and cheap coffee. I studied under flickering streetlights. I swallowed insults from men who wore polished shoes and called me small. Years passed. Failure followed me like a shadow. My first company collapsed. My partners betrayed me. Investors laughed gently, as if my dreams were a child speaking out of turn. I remember sitting alone in an empty office. The silence was heavy. The walls echoed with my mistakes. That was when she walked into my life. Her name was Aisha. She did not see my losses. She saw my hunger. She listened when I spoke about systems and strategy. She held my shaking hands when I confessed that I was afraid of becoming nothing. She said wealth without character is poverty in disguise. Her words pierced deeper than failure. I rebuilt. Slower, wiser, stronger. I learned to read balance sheets like poetry. I learned to lead with patience instead of ego. I learned that respect earns more than intimidation. The company rose, then expanded, then multiplied. The day I became a billionaire, the city lights looked like fallen stars beneath my window. But success did not silence my past. On our wedding day, as guests waited beneath white roses, and music floated through the air like a blessing, I saw a message that froze my blood. A legal notice. My former partner had reopened an old accusation. Fraud. Deception. A public scandal prepared to erupt within hours. If I walked to that altar, she would marry not a man, but a storm. I looked at her from a distance. Her veil shimmered softly. Her eyes searched for me, with trust so pure. It burned, and I chose to disappear. I left the ceremony. I left her standing there, not because I stopped loving her, but because I loved her too much to let my darkness swallow her light. The world called me heartless. Headlines painted me a villain. She did not speak against me. Months later, when the truth surfaced, and my name was cleared, I went to her with nothing but humility. No guards. No pride. Only truth. She listened, tears resting quietly in her eyes. Then she said something that changed my life forever. She said something that changed my life forever. She said love is not proven in comfort. It is proven in confusion. She stepped closer to me, close enough for me to feel her breath tremble. You should have trusted me with the storm. Her words were not anger. They were pain wrapped in grace. I felt smaller than the boy who once stood in the rain beneath a broken roof. I told her I was afraid. Afraid that the scandal would stain her family name. Afraid that investors would crush everything we built. Afraid that she would wake up one day and regret loving a man chased by shadows. She placed her hand over my heart. You built an empire from dust, she said softly. Why did you think I was too fragile to stand beside you in the wind? In that moment, I understood something brutal and beautiful. Success had taught me how to fight the world. It had not taught me how to trust love. The legal battle ended in my favor. Evidence surfaced. Accounts were cleared. The betrayal of my former partner was exposed to the public. My reputation returned, stronger, cleaner. But my real test stood in front of me. Not investors, not competitors. Her. I asked her for forgiveness without defending myself, without explaining again, without pride. She studied my face the way one studies a scar, not to judge it, but to understand how deep it runs. I left because I wanted to protect you, I whispered. You left because you were still fighting alone, she replied. Not as savior and protected, not as hero and shadow. Equal. Her words felt like a second chance at manhood. I nodded. Not as a billionaire, not as a wounded groom, but as a man learning love for the first time. Weeks later, a small ceremony was arranged. No grand hall, no orchestra, only family, only truth. As I waited this time, I did not check my phone. I did not look for threats. I looked for her. And when she walked toward me in simple white silk, I felt something greater than wealth. Peace. The vows felt different. Heavier. Truer. I promised not perfection, not protection, but partnership. The applause was softer than before, but the meaning was deeper. Yet even as we stood hand in hand, a quiet thought stirred inside me. Yet even as we stood hand in hand, a quiet thought stirred inside me. Was I worthy of a love that refused to abandon me, even when I abandoned it first? The reception was simple. Soft lights, warm laughter, the scent of fresh bread and jasmine in the air. But inside me, an old fear still breathed. Success had given me power. Power had given me enemies. And enemies never disappear. That night, when the guests had left, and silence wrapped around our home, I stood by the window overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered like a crown of fire, a kingdom I had built from sleepless nights and stubborn faith. She came and stood beside me. No words, just presence. I realized then that loneliness had been my longest companion, even at the top, especially at the top. The next morning, reality returned without mercy. A board member requested an emergency meeting. An international competitor had begun acquiring shares quietly. A calculated move. Strategic. Dangerous. If they gained control, everything I had built could shift out of my hands. I felt the old instinct rise again. Handle it alone. Shield her. Protect her from the storm. But I turned to her instead. I explained every detail. The risks. The numbers. The potential collapse. She listened with the same calm strength that once steadied my shaking hands in a broken office years ago. Then she asked a question no advisor had asked. What are you afraid of losing? The company, or your identity without it? The question pierced deeper than market analysis. I had spent my entire life proving I was no longer the poor boy from the leaking roof. I had wrapped my worth in valuation reports and headlines. If the empire trembled, would I tremble with it? Days of tension followed. Meetings stretched into midnight. Voices rose across polished tables. Strategies clashed. And through it all, she remained steady, not giving orders, not seeking control, just reminding me who I was before the billions. One evening, exhausted, I confessed something I had never spoken aloud. If I lose this, I am afraid I will become nothing again. She stepped closer, placed her hand against my chest. You were never nothing, even when you had nothing. The room felt smaller. The truth felt enormous. For the first time, I began to separate my wealth from my worth. And that shift changed the way I entered the final negotiation meeting. I was no longer defending an empire out of fear. I was protecting a vision built with integrity. As I walked into the boardroom for what could decide everything, I felt her faith walking with me. The doors closed behind me, and the chairman cleared his throat. The chairman cleared his throat. His voice was calm, almost gentle, which made the tension sharper. He informed me that the competitor had secured a critical percentage overnight. One more block of shares, and control would shift permanently. The air in the room felt thin, cold, heavy with calculation. Directors avoided my eyes. Some feared loss. Some smelled opportunity. I listened without interrupting, without anger. Years ago, I would have slammed my fist against the table. I would have tried to dominate the room with force. But growth had taught me restraint. When my turn came to speak, I did not defend my position with pride. I defended the people behind the numbers. I spoke of employees who built their lives within these walls, of families supported by our stability, of innovation born from trust, not greed. My voice did not shake, but my heart pounded like distant thunder. Then the competitor's representative entered. Sharp suit, sharper smile. He praised my journey, called it admirable, then calmly proposed a buyout that would triple my personal fortune. Triple. The room stirred. Temptation moved like perfume in the air. With that deal, I could walk away wealthier than ever. Untouchable. Secure. For a moment, I imagined the quiet life. No battles. No threats. But another image rose stronger. Her standing beside me by the river, asking me who I was without the empire. I realized the question was not about ownership. It was about integrity. If I sold out of fear, I would betray the very struggle that built me. I folded my hands slowly on the table. I declined. The silence that followed was electric. The representative's smile faded. Pressure intensified. Warnings disguised as advice filled the room. They believed I would surrender under weight. They did not understand that I was no longer protecting wealth. I was protecting purpose. Hours passed in negotiation. Numbers shifted. Alliances adjusted. Then something unexpected happened. Two silent board members spoke up. Men who had once doubted me. They chose loyalty. They pledged their shares to secure my position. The balance tipped. The takeover attempt collapsed. Not because I was powerful, but because I had finally learned to lead with trust instead of control. When I walked out of that building, the sky was washed in evening gold. My phone vibrated. A message from her. No words. Just one line. I knew you would choose who you are. I closed my eyes. Not in relief. In gratitude. Yet as I stood there, watching the city breathe beneath the fading sun, another realization began to form within me. Another realization began to form within me. Victory felt different this time. There was no rush of ego, no hunger for headlines, no desire to prove anything to anyone. For years, I believed success meant climbing higher than every insult thrown at me. Now I understood something quieter. Success meant becoming someone my younger self would feel safe with. When I reached home, she was waiting in the living room. Soft light from a single lamp wrapped around her like calm itself. She did not ask about numbers. She did not ask about profit. She looked at my face. And she knew. I told her everything. The offer. The temptation. The moment I almost imagined walking away. She listened without interruption. Then she asked gently, "If the company disappeared tomorrow, who would you be?" The question no longer terrified me. I thought about the boy under the leaking roof. The young man studying beneath a streetlight. The broken groom who left the altar to protect the woman he loved. I would still be him. Flawed. determined, learning. That night we spoke not about expansion, but about legacy, not buildings, not acquisitions. Impact. We decided to build something beyond profit. A foundation for children who grew up where I did. Scholarships for boys who carried shame instead of opportunity. Training centers for fathers who worked until their hands cracked. I wanted wealth to breathe, to move, to heal. Months later, I visited the neighborhood where I was raised. The same narrow streets, the same scent of dust and cooking oil in the air. But this time I arrived not as a frightened child. I arrived as proof. As I stood there speaking to young students seated on plastic chairs, I saw my past in their eyes. Doubt, hunger, hidden fire. I told them that pain is not an identity. Failure is not a destiny. And love, when chosen with courage, multiplies strength. When I finished, applause rose softly. But one small boy stayed seated. He looked at me with a seriousness beyond his years. And he asked a question that made my chest tighten. He said, "What if I try and still fail?" The room grew quiet. Even the air felt still. I walked toward him slowly. I saw myself in his thin shoulders, in the way his hands gripped the edge of the chair. I knelt so our eyes were level. "You will fail," I told him gently. "More than once. More than you think you can survive." A faint ripple moved through the audience. I did not soften the truth. Failure will embarrass you. It will test your friendships. It will make you question your worth. But failure is not the opposite of success. It is the forge that shapes it. He swallowed quietly. "And if people leave?" he asked. The question carried more weight than his small voice. "Some will leave," I answered. "Some will doubt you. Some will misunderstand your silence as weakness. But the right people will stay. They will not stay because you are perfect. They will stay because you are becoming." As I said those words, I felt the truth echo inside my own marriage. I thought of the altar, of the scandal, of the night I stood alone by the window. She had stayed, not because I was a billionaire, but because I was willing to grow. I placed my hand on the boy's shoulder. "If you fail, stand again. If you fall, learn again. And when you succeed, lift someone else." His eyes softened, not with certainty, but with courage. That was enough. When I left the neighborhood that evening, the sky was painted in deep orange and violet. I felt something shift inside me. For years, I chased wealth to escape poverty. Now I was building purpose to escape emptiness. At home, she was reviewing plans for the foundation. Documents spread across the table. Her focus steady. She looked up and smiled. "How did it go?" she asked. I told her about the boy, about the question, about the fear I once carried in silence. She listened, then said quietly, "You answered him the way you once needed someone to answer you." Her words settled in my chest like peace. Later that night, as the city lights flickered beyond our window, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. A message with no greeting. "I know the truth about what happened on your wedding day." My breath slowed. The past, it seemed, was not finished with me. The message remained on my screen long after the lights in the city dimmed. I felt the old tension attempt to return. The instinct to prepare for battle. To assume betrayal. But I was no longer the man who reacted from fear. I showed her the message. I did not hide it. I did not carry it alone. She read it carefully. Then she looked at me, calm and steady. "Truth does not fear light," she said. The next morning I responded, Not with threats, not with panic, but with an invitation to speak openly. The sender turned out to be a former employee, a quiet witness to the chaos of that time. He confessed that he had remained silent years ago out of fear of losing his job. He had recently learned the full extent of the conspiracy that nearly destroyed me. Guilt had followed him like a shadow. He offered documents, proof that my disappearance on the wedding day was connected to a final attempt to extort me moments before the ceremony. Evidence that I had chosen silence to prevent public destruction. When the information was released, the last stain on my name dissolved. But something unexpected happened inside me. I felt no desire for revenge, no hunger to expose those who had wronged me beyond what justice required. Because the greatest victory had already happened. I had learned to trust. I had learned to love without control. I had learned that strength is not dominance. It is integrity under pressure. Weeks later, we returned to the same wedding hall. Not for a ceremony, but to fund scholarships for young couples who lacked resources but carried dreams. As we stood together on that stage, I held her hand openly. No secrets, no fear. I looked at the audience and spoke with a voice that no longer trembled. Wealth can build walls, but character builds foundations. Pain can break pride, but love rebuilds purpose. Success without humility is empty. Failure without growth is wasted. The true measure of a person is not how high they rise, but how deeply they learn. When the applause filled the room, it felt different from any business triumph. It felt earned. That night, as we walked home beneath a quiet sky, I realized something simple and powerful. I once thought becoming a billionaire was my greatest achievement. It was not. Becoming a better man was. And that is the lesson I carry forward. Money may change your circumstances. Love changes your character. Integrity protects both.